Hello everyone and welcome to the latest episode of Track Talks. Today I'm joined by Louise Coward, Head of Insight at Transport Focus. Thank you for joining us, Louise.
You're very welcome.
So to start off with, could you tell me a little bit about how you came to be part of Transport Focus?
My role is Head of Insight, and I've been with Transport Focus now for getting on for 8 years, so quite a long time. I am a researcher by profession. Before I joined Transport Focus, I worked in predominantly research agencies, doing all kinds of research, mostly in the either government sector, so looking at things like health, education, nutrition, that sort of thing, and some transport. Then I sort of fancied a change and decided to move over to more of a client role where you get to not only do the research and be heavily involved in generating research and insight, but also you get to do the juicy stuff afterwards, which is see what's being done with it and make sure that the results of any research and insight are carried through in the organisation. And that's sort of how I ended up at Transport Focus, originally just on an 18-month contract looking specifically at smart ticketing. It was quite a sort of key point back in 2012 across all modes. How can we improve ticketing, move to smart technology? So I started off looking specifically at that, and then I've moved into more of a general insight role within Transport Focus, and I'm now responsible for the whole team and all modes across all subjects. So I'm really lucky. I've got a great job.
So I can imagine you've seen quite a change with regards to smart ticketing since you started doing that research.
Yeah, absolutely. Clearly there's been quite a lot of developments, both in smart ticketing, but also ticketing more generally in terms of the products that are available. But equally, I suppose you could say, has it been that quick? Because here I am 8 years later, and we haven't necessarily seen those huge innovations or developments. We're not all looking at a nationwide Oyster card. That was very much the kind of aspiration of passengers back in 2012. We know, working in the industry, that there's a huge amount of both technical and commercial and all sorts of other complications that mean that you can't just introduce smart ticketing across the country and sort of expand the boundaries of Oyster out to cover the whole country, for lots of reasons. But passenger using rail in Doncaster or buses in Liverpool, when they are used to seeing things like a very simple integrated smart ticketing system, to them they often don't understand, why can't we have that where I live? Why can't I use it across the metro in Manchester, everywhere that I'd like to for my travels?
So Transport Focus called for a Head Out to Help Out scheme in response to getting more people back on the railways. How else do you think we should be working to get more people back travelling on trains and restore some passenger confidence that might have been lost?
We had our Head Out to Help Out sort of initiative last week, which we talked about when the increase in rail fares from January was announced, and the RPI increase. We were very much saying last week that the RPI increase at the moment is a little bit of not a red herring, but it's not almost the right kind of issue for passengers at the moment, because things are so different post-COVID. Usually when the fare increase is announced, you get that whole groundswell of, my season ticket is going to be going up by £100 from January. That's not fair. I don't feel I'm getting the level of service to meet that increase in fare. But the reality right now, of course, is a lot of people who did have those season ticket products and were buying tickets on a regular basis currently aren't travelling, and they don't have a ticket. So the fact that the ticket that they would have bought is going up in price is almost, a bit irrelevant right now, because short term we know passenger volumes are really low, and some of that is about people just not having the reason to make a journey. So if my office is closed, why would I need to be travelling on the railway 5 days a week? My whole reason for making those journeys isn't there anymore. But equally, there is something around people are feeling fearful about getting back into normal life and getting back into normal patterns of using rail and other public transport beyond that. So I think there is a real sort of reassurance piece to be done, in terms of letting people know that they are being looked after, that safety and all, there are new initiatives in place to make sure that people are safe when they're travelling and that they're not going to be exposed to coronavirus just by getting on board a train or a bus or whatever else it is. So, part of it is around communicate, this is what we're doing, but equally it's about, this is what we need you to do as a passenger. We want to welcome you back on board the railway, but we need you to also, take certain steps to make everybody, including yourself, safe. So that's around the face coverings, it's around hand sanitizer, it's about telling people, do wash your hands before and after you make your journeys, do try and maintain social distancing. So I think that there's a lot to be said for that reinforcement of what it will be like now, and how things are different, because of course many people won't have been near the railway for several months, even if they were a very regular user beforehand.
I was going to say, for myself, the first time I went back on a train was just towards the end of April, and that even I felt a little bit apprehensive about it. But after you seem to have done it once, I think you kind of realise all the hard work that like all the rail franchises have been putting in. I get the Transpennine Express home when I go see my family, and there was little ticks and crosses as to which seats you could sit in, so social distancing was maintained, there was masks being handed out, there was hand sanitizer all over the station. So I think it also is a little bit of having a bit of confidence in the work that people are doing as well to keep the public safe.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And people are used to seeing in other contexts. The world has changed, but the people who design systems have kind of considered all the right issues and put the right steps in place to make sure that, my safety is protected, and that it will be a good experience when I go back to using public transport and railway specifically. Um, but equally, there's a lot of uncertainty around what actually is it going to be like, and what happens if things aren't perhaps as expected. It's fine to think about, well, they're managing the capacity, and at the large stations there will be the ability to keep social distancing. But then what happens if there is a problem and there is disruption, and how will I be able to make sure that I can get on the train if the previous two trains have been cancelled? And while pre-COVID, then the concerns about it may have been, will I be able to squash myself on board, and just how unpleasant will it be? Now, clearly, there's, well, am I actually allowed to get on board? And what happens if I get on and then find out that other passengers are getting on and perhaps they're not wearing face coverings? What am I supposed to do as a passenger if somebody comes and sits next to me in a seat that has a marking on it saying don't sit here? If somebody actually comes and sits there and isn't wearing a face covering, what happens then?
Yeah, so with the impending rise in rail fares in the new year, what impact do you think this will have on passengers? Is this the right thing to be happening in a post-COVID economy or post-COVID environment? Is there maybe more things that we should be thinking about?
I think this is where it's almost turning the argument on its head around, rail fares in the sort of absolute value of a ticket are one thing, but actually what we're saying is there should be better kinds of tickets and products available to suit how people are going to be travelling in the future. We know that a lot of people are going to be travelling into the office or the workplace less frequently. Quite a lot of people are telling us that they expect to work from home on a more regular basis post COVID. So the 5 day a week season ticket that they may have bought on an annual basis or a monthly basis, which did represent reasonably good value per
Yeah.
journey at the time, isn't going to be the right kind of product if I'm only traveling 3 days a week. That cost split over 5 days a week feels okay, but split it over 3 days a week, suddenly, irrespective of the RPI increase, for me, my journey and the price I'm paying per journey has gone up way more than that 1.6%, because the whole sort of cost per wear as we think about it in terms of buying something
Hmm.
that you're going to wear, but the cost per wear of your season ticket is going to be going up hugely irrespective of the RPI increase if I'm using it less. So
Yeah.
that whole let's have some better products that fit the new way that people are going to be using the railways seems a bit of an open door almost. So let's have 2 day, 3 day season tickets that for those people who know they are going to have new work patterns that perhaps involve 1 day at the workplace, 1 day working from home and alternating. But equally, I think people are expecting there to be a lot more flexibility. So not everybody is going to want to commit to that. Even a more flexible season ticket isn't going to be right for some users. And that's where things like the Carnet products, sort of bundles of tickets that I can use flexibly, really come into their own.
Absolutely. So your Make Delay Pay campaign was all about raising awareness about delay compensation for passengers. What were your main findings from this study, and what was your thought behind it? What was the motivation?
Well, the motivation for it was we knew that a lot of people didn't claim compensation when their trains were delayed. So we've done a couple of pieces of work in the past that look at both who would be eligible for claiming. Did people who were eligible because they travelled on a train that was delayed, did they know that they were able to claim for that train journey and get some money back? And among the people who were eligible and knew about it, did they actually go on to claim, and what were the sort of motivations for doing that or the reasons for not doing it? So we knew that there was almost a couple of gaps there. Firstly, that people who were entitled to compensation didn't realise it. And secondly, people who knew that they could do it didn't do it for whatever reason. Sometimes they thought it wasn't worth doing. They thought it would just be incredibly complicated. They didn't think it was worth doing from a value perspective. I mean, we know that the sort of higher value journeys where people have paid more for their tickets, that they do tend to claim for their compensation more readily for larger amounts of money, which makes sense. But we were very much, let's let people know that they are entitled to this money back if they don't get the service that they were expecting and should have received. So we did some work encouraging operators to be upfront with their passengers and to let their people know that they were entitled to claim when they were late, but then equally reaching out directly to passengers through, we had a cinema advert and we had in-station advertising at large stations, letting people know that effectively, if they chose not to claim, they were sort of throwing money down the drain by not getting money back that they were entitled to, at the same time as encouraging the operators to make the process of claiming as easy as possible. So, for instance, if I've booked a ticket, an advance ticket on a particular train, and the operator knows that I was on board the 11 o'clock from King's Cross up to Edinburgh, and I've booked through the website or through the app, it knows I'm there. It then knows that particular train was delayed by an hour or whatever. um, Almost, why should I, as the passenger, have to notice that or do anything to get my money back?
Yeah.
Actually, you've got all the information as the operator. Just give me 50% of my money back, or whatever level I'm entitled to, and don't make me as the passenger work for my refund, my compensation, when there's no practical reason why you can't just give me back what I'm entitled to. Um, so yeah, I mean, we're very much um, following this through, this make delay pay. Passengers do spend large amounts of money on tickets, and they they are entitled to get the level of service and the punctuality that they've bought. And when they don't get that, they should get the necessary compensation as easily as possible, was our thinking behind the Make Delay Pay campaign.
So in July, you published another piece of research, your Spring National Rail Passenger Survey. Does this primarily look at passenger satisfaction, or is there other elements that you look at in it as well?
So the National Rail Passenger Survey is a huge survey that's been running for more than 20 years. And we do field work twice a year in both the spring and the autumn. And every year we speak to more than 50,000 passengers, and we offer them the opportunity to complete the survey, either by filling in a paper questionnaire, and some listeners may have come across interviewers at stations as they're about to get on a train and being asked to complete the survey. So people can either take a paper questionnaire or give us an email address, and we then send them the online survey, and they can complete it after the journey. And yeah, it's primarily around satisfaction with journeys, and the fact that it's such a large scale survey and has been going for as long as it has means that we're really able to track satisfaction over time and see the impact of um, changes in the external environment. And they can be both sort of positive or negative, really. So, for instance, you can see where there's been major station rebuilding works. You can track the data over time with the station and probably see that, you know, the station wasn't great, which was the very reason for redeveloping it. Satisfaction was relatively low. You can then follow through while work is ongoing and see the impact of perhaps sort of built-in work going on, reduced retail, no seating or whatever it is. And then out the other end, when the new station is revealed and everything is nice and new and shiny, you can then see improved passenger satisfaction with the station, and that carries through. So you can sort of almost see a trend in the data, either at the national level. You can see whether reliability has been good or bad from the satisfaction scores. You can see on a route when new trains came in, and the impact on satisfaction when suddenly there's new rolling stock and people are valuing the cleanliness, the improved sort of conditions on board, better seating, better luggage, better information, all of those kinds of things, you really do see in the data. Of course, the National Rail Passenger Survey, because of the way that it's done in station, we were impacted by COVID. So
Mm-hmm.
back in March, we were just in the last couple of weeks of the data collection for the spring 2020 wave, and we did have to kind of pull out of field work earlier than we anticipated, but we did publish the results in early July on a kind of reduced sample size. We were about 70% or so of the total that we had been aiming for. But that's the advantage of it being such a large scale survey, was that the data is still very robust, and we do have it all available on our website. We have a data hub for all of our large scale research. So the National Rail Passenger Survey is on there.
So is the survey something that the rail industry is supportive of? Do you have any operators that are particularly involved, or?
I mean, the operators do all take the NRPS scores incredibly seriously. They have to. It's the passenger satisfaction measure within franchise agreements. So it matters what score they get, and many of them do work with us to understand exactly, why they have the scores the way they do. They look at what they need to do to improve their scores. So, for instance, you've got the overall satisfaction score, which is kind of the summary measure when you ask a passenger, overall, how satisfied were you with the journey that you've made? But then we also ask around 30 more detailed measures of satisfaction, and that's where things like, cleanliness of the inside of the train, cleanliness of the outside, luggage facilities on board, information at the stations, and lots of other measures are also asked about. And what we're able to do and do on a regular basis is look at the individual measures that are the biggest drivers of the overall satisfaction measure.
Do you have any other rail focus research coming up in the next couple of months? And can you give us maybe any teasers as to what you're going to be looking at, or what you think Transport Focus will be looking at in the near future?
Sure. I mean, one thing that we have set up in the last month or so that is going to be a really important source of information for us is our community of rail users. So that is a really good group of 60 rail users, people who used rail regularly pre-COVID. All across the country, all across GB, and we're using them as our kind of source of information on what's happening, how they react to new initiatives, what they think of changes to rail as we all go back to the new normal. Some of our rail community have been using rail throughout the period, so perhaps key workers who've had to be travelling in to work throughout. They've been telling us what's worked for them, how they feel about more passengers coming back. We've got some people who were very regular users who are perhaps feeling a little bit more fearful or anxious about returning to rail. They don't know when they're going to be doing it. So for them, we're exploring, what kind of reassurance do they need? What are they expecting to see? And then as they go back to making journeys, we'll be sort of understanding from them, what was it actually like? Did it match up with their expectations? Do they feel that the things that they would expect to be seeing are being done? So we're kind of that's our big rail-based research, but we are also doing, and have been since May, a weekly survey where we ask people which modes of transport they have used in the past 7 days, and we've been tracking that for sort of 17 weeks now. And we're seeing over time use of rail increasing, but quite gradually. And for people who have used rail, we're asking them to tell us how it was, so their satisfaction with the kinds of things that we know are particularly important right now.
So this is our final closing question that we do like to ask everyone that comes on the Track Talks podcast. Where do you hope to, or where would you like to see the rail industry in 10 years' time?
I would like to see it being more sort of user focused and more designed around how people want to use it, and to be taking into account what users are looking for. So we talked a bit earlier around ticketing. I think generally that there is a tendency for us to think about the issues and the barriers and the reasons why things can't be progressed. But I think COVID has almost encouraged everybody really to just look at the world afresh, and all of those sorts of historic reasons why things either were done the way they were or couldn't be thought possibly to ever change. That's kind of not the case anymore. We're starting from a bit of a blank sheet of paper. So there is scope to redesign how people use rail, what kinds of information is available to them. There's a lot happening in terms of people's attitudes to the green agenda and moving to more sustainable transport. That's out there now, and I think there are a lot of people who possibly, if the conditions were right, may consider using rail when perhaps they didn't. Have perhaps a perception out there that the railway is not particularly pleasant, that it is expensive, that it's not that inclusive. There's plenty of opportunity to turn that around and to encourage people who did use rail to come back to it, but equally to encourage people who haven't used rail for a while to come in and use it. We know people are using technology quite differently now. I think that the change in the last 10 years in how we're all using our smartphones and how we all use social media much more, that's only going to accelerate and continue. People are going to expect to see rail and other services and other industries to provide them with up-to-date information and to be much more user-focused and user-centred. And I'd like to see rail joining in with that and thinking a bit more, what do our passengers need, than what would we like to offer our passengers.
Well, thank you very much for joining me today, Louise. It's been great to hear about all the research that you're doing at Transport Focus and how you're staying in touch and not forgetting about the passengers during COVID. You're keeping in touch and seeing how they're feeling and what their experiences have been, and seeing how we can build on that coming back into some sort of new normal.
You're very welcome. Thank you. It's good to talk to you.
Thank you very much.
All right. Bye.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of RTM's Track Talk. Stay tuned for our next episode coming soon, and don't forget to like, share and subscribe if you've enjoyed listening.